The gavel struck once, then twice. The sound echoed through the House Judiciary Committee chamber like a judge delivering a death sentence. Chairman Jim Jordan leaned into his microphone, his voice already climbing toward that signature crescendo that had made him a conservative media darling. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, the uniform of a man who came to fight, not negotiate. "We are here today," Jordan declared, his words machine-gun rapid, "to address what can only be described as the systematic weaponization of the federal government against the American people. This administration has crossed lines that previous administrations wouldn't even approach." The gallery was packed. Cameras lined the back wall like sentries. Journalists hunched over laptops, their fingers poised over keys, waiting for the soundbite that would dominate the evening news cycle. Republican members nodded in practiced unison. Democratic members shifted in their seats, exchanging knowing glances. They'd seen this performance before, Jordan turning a committee hearing into a campaign rally, facts optional, fury required. But seated 3 chairs down from the ranking member, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still. Her navy blazer was buttoned. Her expression was neutral. And on the table before her sat a single manila folder, unremarkable except for the small tab protruding from its edge, marked with a single word in red ink. Facts. No one in that room, least of all Jim Jordan, had any idea that the next 12 minutes would become the most watched congressional exchange of the year, replayed millions of times, dissected by legal scholars, and ultimately studied as a masterclass in how preparation obliterates performance. This is that story. Jim Jordan didn't arrive in Congress to make friends. The former NCAA Division I wrestling champion from Ohio brought the mentality of the mat to the marble halls of power. Dominate your opponent, never give ground, and when you smell weakness, go for the pin. By 2024, Jordan had perfected his craft. As chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and co-founder of the ultra-conservative Freedom Caucus, he had become one of the most feared interrogators in Washington. His questioning style was surgical in its brutality. Rapid-fire accusations, interrupted responses, rhetorical traps disguised as questions. "Jordan doesn't conduct hearings," one Democratic strategist had said after a particularly brutal session. "He stages prosecutions where the verdict is decided before the witness sits down." The technique had served him extraordinarily well. His highlight reels played on loop across conservative media. His Twitter account boasted millions of followers who lived for the moments when Jordan destroyed or eviscerated witnesses. Campaign fundraising emails featured images of Jordan mid-interrogation, finger-pointing, face intense, with subject lines like, "Jim Jordan destroys the deep state, chip in $25 to help him do it again." Today's hearing was supposed to be another trophy for the collection. The topic, executive overreach and the abuse of federal agencies. The witnesses, hand-picked conservatives ready to testify about government tyranny. The outcome, predetermined. Or so Jordan thought. Jasmine Crockett's path to Congress had been nothing like Jordan's. Where he had wrestled his way through college, she had argued her way through law school. Where he had built a brand on confrontation, she had built a reputation on preparation. Before winning her seat representing Texas's 30th Congressional District in 2022, Crockett had spent years in the trenches as a public defender and civil rights attorney. She had stood in courtrooms where being unprepared didn't just mean embarrassment. It meant her client went to prison. She had faced judges who wouldn't tolerate theatrics and prosecutors who knew every trick in the book. Those years had taught her something Washington had forgotten. Facts are weapons, and the most devastating victories come not from shouting louder, but from knowing more. She does her homework like someone's life depends on it, one of her former law school professors had recalled, because in her old job, someone's life often did. When Crockett arrived in Congress, the establishment on both sides initially dismissed her. Another freshman representative, another vote to count, another face in the crowd. They didn't know she'd been preparing for this moment her entire career. As Jordan's opening statement thundered through the chamber, Accusations flying about unprecedented executive actions, weaponized agencies, constitutional violations. Crockett sat quietly reviewing the contents of her folder. She'd spent 3 weeks preparing for this hearing. While Jordan's staff had prepared sound bites, hers had pulled transcripts. While his team selected friendly witnesses, hers had compiled every public statement Jordan had made about executive power over the past 15 years. A colleague leaned over and whispered, "You sure you want to go after him? He doesn't lose these fights." Crockett looked up, her expression calm. He's never fought someone who actually did the research. The hearing proceeded exactly as Jordan had scripted it. Witness after witness testified about government overreach. Jordan's questions grew more theatrical with each round, his voice reaching pulpit preacher levels as he denounced the systematic destruction of American freedoms. Republican members asked softballs. Democratic members offered token resistance but seemed resigned to being props in Jordan's show. Then came Crockett's turn. "The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas," Jordan said, barely glancing in her direction. His tone suggested he expected 5 minutes of predictable partisan pushback before moving on to the next Republican member who would help him regain momentum. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her voice steady and clear. "I want to start by establishing a baseline for this conversation, because I've heard the phrase unprecedented executive overreach used 17 times so far today." Jordan shifted in his chair. 17. She'd counted. "Mr. Chairman, you've been particularly vocal about the number of executive orders issued by this administration. In fact, just 40 minutes ago, you stated, and I'm quoting here, 'This president has issued more executive orders than any president in modern history,' showing a complete disregard for the separation of powers. Did I hear that correctly?" Jordan leaned forward, sensing a trap but unable to see its shape. The gentlewoman heard correctly. This administration has run roughshod over constitutional limits. Crockett opened her folder. The sound of papers rustling filled the suddenly quiet room. "Mr. Chairman, according to the National Archives, and I have the official data here, the current administration has issued 89 executive orders in its first 3 years. The previous administration, which you served during and defended repeatedly, issued 220 executive orders in 4 years. That's more than double. Could you help me understand how 89 is more than 220? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jordan's face flushed. "The gentlewoman is playing semantic games. It's not about the number." "But Mr. Chairman," Crockett interrupted gently, 47 minutes ago, you specifically said the number was evidence of overreach. And I have your exact quote from a 2017 hearing where you said, "The sheer volume of executive actions is itself evidence of a president who doesn't respect constitutional limits." That was your testimony before this very committee. She slid a document forward. Even from the gallery, people could see the official congressional seal at the top. Jordan's jaw tightened. His fingers drummed on the table, the first sign of the explosion building beneath the surface. "Context matters, Congresswoman. The previous administration's orders were about restoring constitutional governance. This administration's orders attack American freedoms." "Interesting distinction," Crockett replied, her tone conversational, almost friendly. "Could you give me an example of an executive order from this administration that attacks American freedoms in a way that previous executive orders did not?" "The weaponization of the FBI," Jordan shot back immediately, his voice rising. "The raid on Mar-a-Lago was an unprecedented assault on a former president. The FBI has been turned into a political weapon, and everyone knows it." This was the moment Crockett had been waiting for. She turned to a new page in her folder. "Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you brought up FBI search warrants. I have here the FBI's annual report showing that the Bureau executed 1,643 search warrants last year, following the exact same legal process that was used in the case you're referring to. Each required a federal judge to review evidence and determine probable cause existed. Would you describe all 1,643 643 of those searches as unprecedented assaults. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Jordan's eyes narrowed. The gentlewoman knows that's completely different. Is it? Crockett's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the velvet now. Because I also have here, Mr. Chairman, your co-sponsorship record for the FISA Amendments Act of 2008, which expanded these exact search authorities, and I have testimony you gave supporting even broader FBI search powers in 2015. At what point did you change your position on FBI search warrants, when they were executed under an administration you supported, or when they were executed under one you oppose? Now hold on. Jordan's voice was climbing, his famous temper starting to show. His face was red now, his finger jabbing toward Crockett. I will not sit here and be lectured about constitutional principles by a freshman representative who doesn't understand the first thing about— Mr. Chairman, Crockett interrupted, her voice still level. I'm not lecturing you. I'm quoting you. Your own words, your own votes, your own positions. If they sound contradictory, perhaps the problem isn't my understanding. The room fell silent. Every camera was trained on Jordan, whose mouth had opened to respond, but no words came out. His staff whispered urgently behind him, but he waved them off, his eyes locked on Crockett. She wasn't done. Mr. Chairman, throughout this hearing, you've repeatedly condemned what you call unelected bureaucrats making policy decisions. It's a compelling phrase. You've used it 9 times today alone, but I have here a memo from your office dated March 2019, directing agency heads to, and I quote, exercise maximum discretion to advance policy objectives without requiring congressional approval. This appears to be your signature at the bottom. Could you confirm that for the record? Crockett slid the document across the table. Jordan stared at it. The silence stretched from seconds into what felt like minutes. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. For perhaps the first time in his 16-year congressional career, Jim Jordan, the man famous for never being at a loss for words, the chairman who dominated every hearing, the conservative hero who could talk for hours without notes, had absolutely nothing to say. I'll take that as confirmation, Crockett said quietly. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. Thank you for your time. The timer showed she still had 43 seconds remaining. She'd devastated him and didn't even need her full 5 minutes. Jordan's face had gone from red to almost purple. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its commanding boom. The gentlewoman's time has expired. But it hadn't. Everyone in the room knew it hadn't. A Republican member tried to jump in with a friendly question to help Jordan recover, but the damage was absolute. Journalists were already typing frantically. Phones buzzed throughout the gallery as producers texted their on-air talent. We have the clip. It's devastating. Democratic members sat in stunned silence, trying not to smile. Even they hadn't expected this. Crockett gathered her folder and returned to her seat, her expression unchanged. No triumph, no gloating. Just the same calm competence she displayed throughout. Jordan attempted to regain control, calling on another Republican member, but his voice lacked conviction. He kept glancing at the documents Crockett had submitted, as if hoping they would somehow disappear. They didn't. Within 8 minutes, the clip was trending on Twitter. Within 20 minutes, it had been viewed over 1 million times. Within an hour, every major network had interrupted regular programming to show the exchange. In an extraordinary confrontation on Capitol Hill today, one anchor reported, House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan appeared to be caught in multiple contradictions of his own making, left speechless by a methodical presentation of his own past positions. The caption below read, Freshman Rep silences Jordan with facts. By nightfall, the exchange had been viewed 15 million times across platforms. The hashtags #facts, Overfury, and Crockett receipts were trending nationwide. Late-night comedy shows rushed to include the moment in their opening segments. Did you see this? One host asked his audience, cueing up the clip of Jordan's speechless moment. I haven't seen someone that quiet since my teenager after I asked who put the dent in the car. But beneath the humor was something more significant. Political scientists began analyzing the exchange as a potential watershed moment, not because Crockett had embarrassed Jordan, though she had, but because of how she'd done it. There was no name-calling, observed a Georgetown professor of political communication. No personal attacks, no questioning of his patriotism or intelligence. She simply presented his own record and asked him to reconcile the contradictions. It's devastating precisely because it's irrefutable. Conservative media initially tried to ignore the story, but as the views climbed past 20 million, then 30 million, they were forced to respond. The defenses were predictable. She ambushed him. She took quotes out of context. This is just another example of the media protecting Democrats. But fact-checkers quickly verified every document Crockett had presented. Every quote was accurate. Every date was correct. Every signature was genuine. Jordan himself remained uncharacteristically silent for 2 days before issuing a terse statement. Yesterday's hearing was supposed to be about holding this administration accountable, not playing gotcha with selective quotations. I remain committed to defending the Constitution and the American people. The statement only made things worse. By refusing to address the contradictions directly, he seemed to confirm them. For Crockett, the aftermath brought both opportunity and pressure. Her social media following quadrupled overnight. Interview requests flooded in from every major outlet. Democratic leadership began discussing more prominent roles for her. But in her first interview after the hearing, she deflected attention away from the viral moment. "I didn't go into that hearing trying to embarrass anyone," she told a national news program. "I went in trying to establish facts. The reason this moment resonated isn't because I was particularly clever. It's because people are exhausted with political theater. They want their representatives to do the homework. They want consistency. They want to trust that principles matter more than party." The interview clip went viral too. Clearly, there was an appetite for something different. 3 months later, the long-term impacts became clear. Democratic candidates nationwide had adopted what consultants called the Crockett method: methodical fact-checking, bringing receipts, staying calm while opponents exploded. Republican strategists privately worried about what one called the vulnerability of the volume approach. For years, their most effective communicators had been loud, aggressive, and theatrical. But Crockett had exposed the weakness in that strategy. When you make your arguments based on emotion rather than consistency, someone with a good filing system can destroy you. Jordan continued chairing the Judiciary Committee, but colleagues noted changes. He was more careful about making historical claims. He checked with staff more frequently before making definitive statements. And when Democratic members questioned him, particularly Crockett, his responses were noticeably more measured. "She got in his head," one Republican member admitted privately. Now, whenever he makes a dramatic claim, you can see him wondering if someone's going to pull out a receipt showing he said the opposite 3 years ago. For Crockett, the viral moment became both a launching pad and a responsibility. She was appointed to the Ways and Means Committee, a rare achievement for a sophomore representative. Her name recognition skyrocketed, and political observers began speculating about statewide office, perhaps even a future presidential run. But she remained focused on the work that had brought her to Washington in the first place. "That hearing wasn't the goal," she explained to a reporter 6 months later. "It was a byproduct of preparation. I didn't prepare to go viral. I prepared to understand the facts, the history, and the record. The viral moment happened because I knew what I was talking about and someone else didn't." A year after the hearing, the Jordan-Crockett exchange became a political science case study. Textbooks highlighted the contrast: Jordan's theatrical performance versus Crockett's evidence-based method. The exchange signaled a shift in political communication. While volume and theater once dominated, Crockett demonstrated that preparation beats performance. Facts beat fury. A well-organized folder proved more powerful than a rolled-up sleeve. This didn't end political theater, but it changed voter expectations. People began demanding receipts for dramatic claims, asking, "Where's the Crockett folder?" In post-election focus groups, voters across the spectrum admired Crockett's preparedness. One independent voter noted, "She didn't yell, she just knew her stuff." A conservative agreed, respecting that she did her homework. The hearing room remains the same, but everyone in it now knows a simple truth. When facts meet fury, facts win. If this story reminded you why preparation matters more than performance, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment below. What's the most important quality you want to see in your representatives? Let's discuss.